There we go. So we're going to do, so get your ball. We're going to do a little bit of work today, kind of figuring out how the pelvis and all the muscles that kind of are in the pelvis and around the pelvis impact our ability to do back bends safely. So I think, a little bit of a, not a debate, but something that has been, I've heard thrown around in a lot of the yoga community over the last many years is whether to squeeze your glutes or not when you're doing a back bend. And, our glutes, our gluteus maximus, our big, strong glute muscle, very much is responsible for extending our leg backward. But our glute is also responsible for, in part, for abducting our leg away from the midline. And our glutes are also responsible for externally rotating. So, all of these actions where we go into extension, and then we can go into abduction and then external rotation. So all of those actions are very much a part of what the glutes are helping to do. So of course, when we're doing a back bend, we're extending our legs, right? We're not flexing, we're extending. And so our glutes are very much a part of that equation. But I think where the trouble lies is that people, because the glutes are so strong, that we've all gotten comfortable with squeezing our glutes really tight and only using our glutes instead of trying to be more global in understanding the relationship of all the muscles around the pelvis and how it supports our back bends. And in particular, the sacrum, your sacrum, everybody knows your sacrum. Here are your two sides of your pelvis and your sacrum in between. And when we anterior tilt our pelvis, our sacrum nutates, which just means that the top of the sacrum kind of nods forward in our body a little bit. So everybody can kind of sit and try that, where you tilt forward into an anterior tilt and you can feel your sacrum tip forward and your tailbone tip backward, kind of like a seesaw, right? And so when we counter nutate, we posterior tilt the spine and we kind of round the pelvis a little bit, but our sacrum, the movement of the sacrum in that is a counter nutation where the top of our sacrum tips back and the bottom of our sacrum moves forward. So counter nutation is really meant for a stabilization when you're not moving. When we are moving in any hinging of any kind, whether it's extension or flexion of the pelvis, we need we need nutation to be happening. So when we tip forward, if we're very flexible in an anterior tilt, we can put a little too much pressure on our lumbar spine. So we need to recruit a lot of musculature around to make sure that we're stabilizing the lumbar spine when we're in a back bend so that we can have a teeny bit of that nutation happening without going overboard where we're just tipping and spilling everything forward and overarching our back. So one might think, oh, squeeze your glutes and tuck your tail, right? And when you try to do that, a lot of the muscles start overworking and you push the sacrum into a counter nutation by doing that. And that we want to avoid. So if you overwork a lot of those muscles, you push the sacrum out of the alignment that it needs to be in for a healthy back bend. So we're going to work a little bit today with how to keep the pelvis in a stable place when we're back bending and learn how to do it healthfully so that we can enjoy back bends instead of feeling like they hurt our back in any way. All right, so sit up straight and tall and just take a moment to close your eyes and perhaps feel into your seated posture, and you can rock forward and rock back, even like a little bit of a mini seated cat-cow for a moment. So you can feel your spine and your tail and your whole pelvis move a little bit. And then after 2 or 3 passes, see if you can settle the pelvis into a nice neutral place. Now, neutral for our pelvis means a teeny bit of nutation of that sacrum. So see if you can notice that our neutral is just a slight anterior tilt, not a lot, just a slight. And this allows that neutral curve of the lumbar spine to settle So feel your spine, feel your pelvis supporting your spine. Allow your head to land over your shoulders. Just take a moment to drop your awareness into the beautiful alignment of your spine. We're designed so perfectly. I marvel at the physics of how we sit. And then release all your attention to that and instead bring your awareness into your breath. A beautiful expansion and condensement of your breath. See if there's anywhere that you rush or anywhere that you tend to not breathe. See if you can experience the slow, steady fullness, as well as the slow, steady emptiness of the breath. Place your hands at your heart. And so see what it feels like to drop your awareness and attention into the centered place of the heart. Breathe deeply there. Set an intention here. Relax your hands. Let's come to lie down on your mat. So I apologize for the noise. There's a lot of yard work going on outside in somebody's yard. Okay, so let's lie down on our back. Okay, so have your ball handy. Also we'll need a block. We'll need 2 blocks, but have your blocks kind of handy too. All right, so let's just enjoy. Stretch your body. Let's reach the right side and reach the left side and just enjoy some awakening in the rib cage and in the hips. You can kind of move one leg longer and the other. And bring your knees into your chest and give yourself a little gentle hug. Maybe sway a little bit from side to side. And hold on to your knees and circle. And we do this all the time, but pay attention to your sacrum while you're here. Kind of get to know the feeling of the boundary lines of your sacrum. Feel where your sacroiliac joints are, where your sacrum meets your pelvic bones. And maybe go the other direction a few times. And now let's pull our knees away from the midline and bring them back in toward the midline and just enjoy some of the openness that you're finding in your hip joints. And the right knee hugs in, left leg long on the ground. Give a good squeeze to your hip and knee. Feel your feet open up, start to move around in your ankles. When we warm up, see if part of your experience can be touching into sensation, kind of welcoming home your body and enjoying whatever you're feeling. Let's change sides. Left knee comes in, right leg long on the ground, and feel into the movement of your feet again. And then grab your strap. I forgot to mention you'll need a strap as well. If you don't have one handy, you can hold the back of your legs, 2 legs straight up in the air. And let's feel into the extension of our spine here. So you can flex and point your feet a little bit if you want to, just to kind of awaken the calves, the Achilles, the shins, the tops of the feet. And then after a few rounds of that, let it be neutral. And of course, you can separate your feet hip width apart if that feels better. So you decide. But mostly I want you to just sense into the spine and the position of the pelvis. So you might be rounding the pelvis a little bit. You might be posterior tilting. And if that's the case, try bending your knees ever so slightly so you can feel that nutation of the sacrum here. Can you feel the top of the sacrum, teeny lift off the ground. We're not overarching, but just a teeny less pressure on the top of the sacrum. And feel the neutral curve of the lumbar spine. And then maybe straighten your legs and bring your legs a little forward and see if you lose that a little bit when you're trying to extend. Sometimes it's difficult to maintain the anterior tilt of the pelvis. So just see what you can do to find a slight lift of the top of the sacrum and a slight curve in the lumbar spine. Root down through your thighs, lengthen through your crown. And then we're going to release the legs and open up like a star. Spread your limbs wide, reach into your legs, exhale, knees into your chest, head comes up. Okay, twice more, coming into that beautiful big open space in the body. And then after you fill your breath, empty your breath and squeeze in toward the center. One more time, feeling that big open space. Exhale, feel the small, snug little space. And then release the head down. Put your feet on the ground. And we're going to just warm up the back body a little bit with some moving bridges. So feet hip width apart. You can move your arms too. So inhale, pelvis comes up, arms come overhead. And then as you exhale, release your arms down and your pelvis down. Grab a block. Let's put our block between our hands so we have some stability as we're moving. See if you can notice if the block helps you kind of find the center of your body, maybe through your chest, maybe through your ribs. Let's go ahead and lower as you exhale. So just a few times moving with your breath. I'm running into furniture, so it's a little tricky to get my arms overhead. But you do you, lifting the pelvis and dropping the pelvis and the arms down at the same time. One more time. Ground the four corners of your feet. Feel the full lift. And then exhale and lower back down. Now, I don't always recommend doing this, but for today, we're just going to feel into the two halves of our pelvis. Now our arms are down at our sides. We're going to lift into a bridge again, but in a wonky way. So lift your right hip faster than your left, and then let the left follow. Find balance up at the top, and then drop your right hip before your left and find balance at the bottom. Okay. And so it almost feels like a roll or a snake kind of movement where you're moving one half of your pelvis differently from the other. So a few rounds of right hip leading, left hip following. And just notice how mobile you are. You know that your pelvis is very free, and this is very much in part because of your sacrum and your SI joints. That the sacrum negotiates between the two halves of the pelvis. So you know it's the mediator of movement. And that's a beautiful thing because we can walk, we can move our two halves of our pelvis separately. Okay, and once you are done with that, just settle onto the ground. We're going to go the other direction. So now press your feet into the ground. We're going to lift the left hip first, followed by the right, and then left hip down, followed by the right. So go at your own pace. Notice if this pattern feels more familiar or less familiar than the other side in your body. So lots of muscles are turning on, I hope, you know, that you're feeling your inner thighs, your hamstrings, your glutes, your hip flexors, your transverse abdominis. You know, there's a lot of muscles that start to get woken up by moving in this way. And then when you're ready, settle your pelvis back down. And notice we haven't even gotten up off the floor yet. So this is, you know, a lot of very specific work to do early on. So just bear with me. You're going to put the ball underneath your pelvis. And we're going to come back to this in a little bit. But for right now, I just want you to feel, is this something Is it too inflated? Is it not inflated enough? What I want you to feel is that you could pick both your feet up off the ground, knees over pelvis, and that you're not going to fall over sideways, that you have the ability to balance on this ball. So if it's very tricky, take the ball out and deflate it a little bit more. Less air in the ball will make it slightly more stable. So be very honest with what you're able to manage here with stability. So that's the whole point. We don't want to overtax what we're doing, so make sure you're in a good way. All right, and then feet back down onto the ground. And let's just enjoy a supported bridge for a couple of breaths. Feet are rooted. You can even take them a little wider than your hips if you want. And breathe into the pelvis. See if you can even put your hands low down on your pelvis if you want to, and just allow some awareness of the breath traveling into the whole pelvic bowl. And even being here in bridge is a little wobbly on a ball versus being on a block. And some of that shifting left and right can be really good to wake up a lot of the muscles that stabilize our pelvis. Okay, let's lift the hips off of there. We're going to use that ball in a little bit. So have it handy, roll over onto your side and come up onto your hands and your knees. Okay. All right, so cat-cows. So as we are here, let's start to feel a little bit more than just a slight nutation. And you might notice that your pelvis and sacrum feel a little tired, from what we've already done. So just allow cat-cows to happen, and you can go a little deeper into the movement pattern of your pelvis. Okay? You can even kind of roll back towards child's pose. So whatever is feeling really good in your body. After a couple rounds of simple cat-cows, we're going to kind of rock our hips left and right. So go, kind of extreme. Push your hip out to the side, push your hip out to the other side, just kind of opening up those side hips a little bit. And then some big pelvic circles. So I've described this before. Imagine your tailbone has a paintbrush on the edge of it, and it's pointing toward the wall behind you. See if you can make a circle with that paintbrush on the wall behind you. So we're just doing some pelvic circles. Go as wide of a circle as your pelvis likes to do. Start to feel a lot of muscles in your ribs, your side waist, your belly, your back, all are kind of warming up and tuning in. And then go the other direction. Paint some circles the other way. So we're kind of moving into a lot of different patterns in our pelvis by doing this. All right, and then let's see if we can move those rolls into our rib cage and let the pelvis do its thing. It's gonna follow, but our attention now is into the ribs, over to the side, down, over to the side, up. Make sure you're breathing. So we're just warming up a lot of the movements of the spine. Change directions. You might find that you're still circling the pelvis. You have this kind of double spiral going on. Try not to focus too much. Let the pelvis follow what the ribs are doing. All right, now we're gonna very gently circle the head. Don't go super strong. And just notice if the rest of your spine, your ribs and your pelvis are also moving naturally in their own spirals. Change directions. All right, and then relax that and stretch back towards child's pose. Hips toward the heels, relax your forehead, and just let your body rest. Feel into the deep hip flexion, knee flexion. Stretch your arms out overhead and walk them forward. Big stretch in your rib cage, your lats, your shoulders. And then let's walk the hands over to one side or the other. Breathing into the rib cage, enjoying. And opening up the other side, walking the hands the other way. Feeling the rib cage open, the sit bones drop down. Head is relaxed, soften your skull. And then come back to center. Come up onto all fours again. Our twist that we often do. Inhale the arm, lifting it high. Exhale and slide that shoulder underneath. Breathing deeply. Feel the rib cage open. And come on up. Reach that arm to the sky. Hand comes down onto the ground. Second side. Lift the chest, open the heart, and then find the twist. Let your head relax. Enjoy the full warming of the spine here. Breathe deeply into the rib cage. Inhale that arm back up in here. Hand comes down onto the ground. Find your way to a dog pose. All right, so yay, we're up off the ground. So enjoy. See if it feels good to pedal your feet, to open up and breathe. Root into hands, index finger, thumb mounds, finding their way. Soften the elbows. Push off the ground and lengthen through your body. Heart lifting to the pelvis. Breathe well. Now notice what your pelvis is doing now. When we were on the ground and our legs were up in the air with the strap and we felt the difference between nutation and counter nutation. Now you don't have feedback of the floor, but can you still feel that you can have a teeny anterior tilt of the pelvis? So the top of the sacrum kind of nestles down toward the ground a little bit. A neutral curve in the low back. Neutral, not excessive. And walk your feet forward. Come into Uttanasana. Feel free to shake your hips, shake your shoulders, shake your head. A halfway lift, open up the spine. Thigh bones move back even here. And you can put your hands on blocks if you want to, or on your legs, wherever you're comfy. Pause in your half lift for a moment so you can again feel that slight nutation of the top of the sacrum, dipping down toward the ground. So we're not overarching the lumbar spine, but we're finding the neutral curve. Bend your knees as much as you need to. If even with hands on blocks, it's too much to have your legs straight. Relax and soften. Drop your seat, lift up, rising to the sky. Lift your arms and open up. Lean back if it feels good. Cactus, open your arms if it feels good. And then find Tadasana. Now, this is one of the few positions where the body naturally kind of moves into a counter nutation. So just notice that, we don't want to have this big tipping forward of the pelvis, that we can have the thigh bones move back so we're not thrusting our pelvis forward. But we're also having a fairly stable back. So there's just a little bit more work in our core here. So the pubic bone lifts toward the navel, the kind of deep pit of the belly is engaged slightly. And can you feel that the sacrum now is in a neutral, it's not, moving forward as much as what we were doing before when we were hinging, and that it's stabilizing the pelvis now in a different way. Soften your knees, breathe well. All right, we're going to move through a vinyasa with a block. So our inner thighs are very much a part of this whole process. So let's stick a block between our thighs so that we have a slight engagement of our thighs as we're moving here. Take a deep breath in, arms lifting up, and then exhale. Bend your knees and lean forward. A halfway lift, spine grows. While you're here, see if you can get the feeling that you're both pulling your legs away from the block and hugging toward the block. So
drag your feet a little bit wider so you feel your outer hips turn on. And at the same time, a gentle touching of the blocks. Turn a lot of muscles on that help us. And then relax that a little bit. We're gonna wobble ourselves back, so little tiny steps to come into dog pose. Extend through the spine. Same. Can you pull your feet apart? Can you hug the block? Can you have a sense that your block can roll backward a little bit to allow the sit bones to widen and feel that nutation of the sacrum? So there, it's a very different feeling. So we can hug the block and use our inner thighs and not over clench our glutes. We shouldn't be using our glutes a lot in this pose because we're stretching them. Okay. So see what it might feel like to over squeeze the block and to feel that kind of triangle between your sit bones and your tailbone kind of harden. And so this is not the effective use of the glutes that we're looking for. All right, so relax that inner thighs rolling back. Let's come forward into a plank. Now, when we squeeze the block here, now we can feel the triangle between our sit bones and our tailbone, and we can stabilize it without tucking the tailbone under. So see if you can find the neutral sacrum, feeling the sit bones come toward each other, feeling the triangle between the sit bones and the tail. Everything's lifting and engaging, but we don't have to tuck our tail to squeeze our glutes to find that. Okay, release your knees down onto the ground. Let go of that block. Come down onto your belly. Roll the shoulders a few times. And then open up into a cobra pose. Let your belly stretch a bit. And then exhale and come back down. We've done this lots. Let's do it again. Put your hands underneath your forehead. Without any support of your pelvic floor or core, lift your right leg up. Okay? And just notice how compressive your low back can feel. You can lift your leg pretty high. Your glutes are turned on, I hope. And then relax that. Now see if you can engage the deep core. So pubic bone lifting toward navel. Find the transverse abdominis, find the pelvic floor. And now lift that leg again. Okay. Imagine you have a block on the inside and the outside of the leg that we're moving into resistance. Stabilizing the pelvis. Your leg is working. Your glutes are probably working harder, but you are not overtaxing the lumbar spine. Okay, relax and melt that leg. Second side, no core, lift the leg. All right, so feel that your low back might be dipping and slouching. You might have more compression there. And then lower the leg down. Let's engage the deep core, the transverse abdominis, pubic bone to navel, hip bones toward midline. And then lift your legs. So your hamstrings and your glutes are turning on to work with that. But notice your low back should feel spacious. Breathing here. So of course, we're going to use our glutes to extend our leg for a back bend. But we do not have to tuck our tail and squeeze the triangle between our sit bones and our tail too hard in order to create that. Let the core be deeper than that. Relax. So a lot of times we can feel that the pelvic floor lift is just, so we're going to try this here because it's, a gentle position to try this in. So if you're finding the triangle between your sit bones and your tailbone, so those are the 3 points of the triangle, and you're squeezing there, notice your tailbone's probably going to counter nutate. Your sacrum's going to counter nutate, and you're going to squeeze your glutes. In dance, my daughter always tells me that the old school terminology was squeeze a dime between your butt cheeks. And that's kind of this type of feeling, right? And this is not what we're looking for in strength for a back bend, but it's often what happens. So relax your glutes. And I think that's where the debate around use your glutes or not comes from. So that's not how we want to use your glutes. Instead, let's see if we can find, instead of the triangle being the force of our action, let's see if we can lift the pit of our stomach and the deeper pelvic floor, which we're going to work with in just a moment, but just see what you can find here. And then a little bit of action in the glutes, and maybe a little bit of that triangle, but nothing's overpowering. Okay, so we're not having to overpower the action. And now lift both your legs up without squeezing a dime between your butt cheeks. Okay, so see if you can find the deeper pelvis instead of just the outer triangle. Lower your legs down. Come up onto all fours and move everything about. Wiggle your hips, sway, let go of that. Okay. All right, now we're going to find our ball, okay, and come to lie down on it again. So we're gonna put the ball underneath the pelvis. So you might have figured out in what we just did that it's like, how do you find the deeper rim of the pelvis instead of the outer rim of the pelvic floor to help us stabilize our sacrum and low back? So I hope this helps. Let's put the ball under your sacrum, okay, 2 feet down on the ground. We're going to start this very, very gently. So I think everybody kind of knows your transverse abdominis, right? We've worked on it so much, but put your hands on your low pelvis for a moment. Put your the heel of your hands on those hip points, your ASIS hip points, and then just let your fingers kind of cross over to each other in that deep low belly. So we're below the navel, above the pubic bone, kind of in that low belly area with our hands. So before we start moving our legs anywhere, let's just see if we can find some muscular engagement under our hands. So relax as you breathe in and engage as you breathe out. All right, so this is the support system for the lumbar spine. And oftentimes we forget that when we're arching our back, we can still engage here. Okay, so we're going to relax your arms down at your sides. We're going to come onto our heels only. Okay, find your breath, and already you should feel slightly more wobbly. And we're going to lift the right knee up so it's right over our pelvis. And then we're going to slowly lower that, that knee down. Now, the whole goal here is to try to stabilize yourself on that block, minimize the wobble, switch sides. We're minimizing the wobble, and we're also minimizing how much our arms are doing, how much our head is doing. See if you can let this really be centered in the stabilization of the pelvis. Try to go slow. All right, now relax, put your feet back on the ground, take a breath. And you might, hopefully you adjusted the ball to be just right for you. Now we're going to lift our legs up. So instead of bringing our knees toward our chest, let's have our knees over our hips. If you need to compensate a little bit, maybe a couple inches forward of the hip joint, but not knees, really close to your chest. All right, so just find, before you even move, find this. Now, there's so many ways that you can add onto this, and we'll just do one. We're going to do two things, but there's many things you could do here. Okay, so now we're going to tap your right heel down and lift your right leg back up. Okay, so we're try not to change the angle of your knee bend. Okay, so it'll probably bend a little bit deeper, flex a little deeper, but just see, we're not just trying to put our heel toward our glutes, we're trying to touch down toward the ground. So again, Shoulders, head, neck, arms, everything's relaxed. We're concentrating the effort in the pelvis. See if you can start to feel the deep pelvic floor. It's not just the abdominal muscles. Imagine you have a block between your thighs so that you can recruit a little bit of more of your adductors. Okay, and then rest either with your feet on the ground or your knees to your chest, whichever feels better in your body. All right, now this gets trickier. We're going to start with moving the arms. So the arms are up overhead, the knees are up over the pelvis like we just did. Okay. All right, so finding breath as we tap our right heel, we're going to bring our right arm straight up in the air. You can even move it a little closer to your legs and then back up and switch sides. Now, like I said, there's a million trillion ways that you can do this to try to make the action of your, the feeling of support and stability in your pelvis. Okay, so, but the same arm and leg are moving. I'm a little stuck because of my couch, but let's start with my arms up here. Okay, so as your heel drops down, your same arm drops down toward your legs and then back up. All right, now, like I said, there's a million ways, a million variations that you could do with this, moving your arms and legs in all different ways and coordinating them with each other in all different ways, but let's just let it be for now. Relax, feet on the ground or knees to chest. Eventually, we're going to take that ball out of there. Feet are on the ground. Root into the four corners of your feet. Now, unlike when we lifted one hip and then the other in the beginning, let's recruit. And before we lift off the ground, ground your four corners of your feet. Start to engage, like when you're trying to lift, use your transverse abdominis, feel your core, and then feel your pelvic floor, and then turn your glutes on to start pushing your pelvis upward. Okay. Lower the same slow pace. We're using our pelvic floor and our core. Touch down, two sides, same time. This time we're going to stay up there in a bridge. So ground the four corners of your feet. Start to hover your pelvis a little bit off the ground. Turn your belly on. Turn your pelvic floor on. Imagine a block between your thighs. Let the triangle between sit bones and tail engage, but not over engage. Press your feet. Lift on up. Feel your glutes work without squeezing a dime. Can you feel the balance of your inner thighs, your pelvic floor, your core, your outer hips, your glutes and your hamstrings? Everything sharing the job of lifting yourself into a back bend. Climb onto the tops of your shoulders a little bit more. Feel the full bridge. Four corners of the feet grounded. Imaginary block between your thigh. Imaginary pull of your feet outward so that you feel your outer hips. Try to feel your triangle. Try to feel the deep core, the deep pelvic floor. Try to feel that your glutes have all this help, that they are very much turned on, but they're not alone. All right, and then slowly lower your pelvis back down onto the ground. Knees to your chest and rock a little bit, swing from side to side. Okay, roll over onto your side and come on up to dog pose. Okay, full breath here. Extending and lengthening. Open the backs of your knees. Pedal if you want. Big breaths here, the sit bone's lifting. Let's lift the right leg up in the air. And when you do this, feel free to stack your right hip over your left hip. Open up the front of your pelvis a bit, then square things off again, lengthen, and bring your foot forward to a lunge. Lengthen through your spine. Blocks are nice if you want them. Okay, open the chest, see what it feels like. Bend and straighten your front knee. You might notice that your hamstrings feel a little tired. You did a lot of work with your hamstrings in those last couple of poses. Come into a lunge, rising up, crescent lunge. Now see what you can feel here. There's a little back bend here. See if you can notice, what is my sacrum doing? Is it over doing that nutation, or is it in a good place? Is my lumbar spine supported by my pelvic floor, by my core? Can I ground my feet and use my inner thighs a little bit more? Can I feel my glute turn on that back leg, both legs really, but especially that extension of the back leg? And release your hands down. Back foot comes forward, full, relax. Inhale for a halfway lift. Spine is growing longer. Exhale and melt back down. Step the other foot back, left foot is now in front. Coming to a lunge, opening the chest. Start moving, bending and straightening the front knee. Finding breath. And then when you're ready, round your legs, root. Rise on up. Maybe the arms lift to the sky, maybe they don't. Doesn't really matter where you end up with your upper body. See if you might need to bend the back knee a little bit to feel that you're not overdoing the pelvic tilt. So a slight nutation of the sacrum, support of the low back with the deep core. See if you can lift the pelvic floor. Engage your deep core on the exhales. Feel the legs support you, your inner thighs, round your feet so your glutes turn on. Find the extension that's supported by your lower body. Okay, hands come down, lift that left leg high in the air, three-legged dog. Open up, stack your hips for a moment. Maybe the knee bends, maybe it doesn't. And then release and melt your foot back down. Come forward into a plank. Hold steady. So a lot of this pelvic stabilization we can find here now. Shoulders away from the ears. Imagine a block between your thighs. Feel the support of the core, the 360 transverse abdominis. What does it feel like to engage the pelvic floor? And then release your knees down and find the ground. Decide where you want your arms to be. They can be down at your sides, out to the sides, or up overhead. We're going to lift everything up. Okay, so find your breath. Inhale. Doesn't matter where your arms ended up. See if you can lift up. Of course, you're using your glutes, but let's try to avoid shrinking our triangle and squeezing a dime. See if you can engage those muscles while staying connected to the deeper lift of the pelvic floor and the core. All right, relax and melt. Come up onto all fours and just loosen up your back after that back bend. Okay. We're going to find our way into Ustrasana, camel pose. All right, so be on your shins. You can put a block between your thighs so that you have the support. And there's lots of ways to let your inner thighs turn on. You can have the block high toward your pelvis. You can put the block between your knees at a little bit wider distance. You can even put the block between
your ankles or your calves. So there's lots of ways to try practicing with the block to help you. Remember that your adductors kind of shine that light. If we're trying to imagine that our pelvic floor is a deep level of support for us, the inner thighs are the beginning of that. They kind of are the entryway into lifting the deep pelvic floor up, okay? So try to squeeze the block, not a lot. It's a gentle feeling. If we squeeze too much, we can get too hardened in that triangle of sit bones and tailbone, and we can feel that our lower glutes are trying to squeeze that down again. So a little bit of release of a nutation of the sacrum, hug the block to counter that. Hands on hips, lift up through your chest, lift your pubic bone toward your navel, feel your core, feel your pelvic floor. Gentle hug of the block. Now see if you can also feel your outer hips. So as if you want to let the block drop for a moment, and then re-hug the block. Okay, and then come back to neutral. That was our little warm up of the Ustrasana. Now with Ustrasana, you can keep your hands on your hips the whole time. You can put your hands on your sacrum if you want to. You can also, go further back, and you can lift your heels if you need a little more height, and you can come into the full version of the pose. So your pathway, you can also put your pelvis against a wall to do this pose. So all the different variations are available. This is not always such an easy pose. So staying here with your hands on your hips can be a nice variation instead of something that might make you push your pelvis forward. All right, so drop into your femur bones, hug the block, lift the pelvic floor, engage your core. Start to open up your chest. The elbows can come back. Find your breathing and go wherever you're going to go for this pose. Maybe you're going to grab onto your heels. Maybe you're not. Open up your chest. Descend the tail. Lift the pubic bone. Find your core. And then relax and come out of the pose. All right, so let's just, before this last one we're going to do, let's just stretch our quads a moment. A couple of choices. You can lie on your side and grab onto the front of your ankle and stretch your core. If you want to do a little deeper variation of this, bring your foot forward, come into a lunge, hand down, and reach back and grab your foot so that you're stretching both your quads and your hip flexors. One of your quadriceps is a hip flexor, but you have more hip flexors than just that one quad. So find the pose that works for your knees, your hips, everything. Open the chest. If you're in a lunge, hug to the midline with your inner thighs. Try not to sink. And then relax and come out of there. Now, as we find the second side, whether you're on your side or whether you're in a lunge, it doesn't really matter. You can find everything that we've been working on. Seek the pelvic floor, seek that triangle, the outer pelvic floor, I might want to call it. Seek the deep core. Okay, see what you can find to help you in this pose. Okay, so if you're in the lunge, your foot is forward, coming into that lunge, grabbing on to your foot. Okay, and if you're on your side, stabilize through your pelvis. So whichever position you're doing, we're hugging, supporting the pelvis. Relax to come out of there, and we're all going to meet on your belly. Okay. Now you might need a strap for this. It's possible, so you can wrap the strap around your ankles if you need to. Grab onto your front ankles and flex your feet. Now let's try not to let our knees splay out. Hip width apart for our knees. Before you lift anywhere, see if you can feel the support of your pelvis. So unlike, the loose back bend that we did in the beginning where we relaxed everything,
Let's lift the pubic bone. Let's hug the hip bones toward the middle. Let's descend the tail. Let's find a slight nutation of the sacrum without overdoing it. Let's find a slight triangle without overdoing it. Let's find all this recruitment, and then inhale to lift up into your back bend. Open your chest. How supportive can you get your spine? Pelvic floor, triangle, glutes, inner thighs, deep core muscles, nutating the sacrum. So many things that you can dip into. And then relax and melt. And come up onto all fours and swish your spine about. Hips go swinging. Eventually, once you've done a few rounds of moving your spine and some swirling, then you can find child's pose and settle your hips back toward the floor. Breathing deep, finding breath. Enjoy the compression on your back or the compression in your hips. And come to roll over onto your back. Grab your strap again. Right foot into the strap. Lift that leg up in the air. Left foot can be on the ground or whole left leg can be on the ground. Drop your shoulders. Move your right hip away from your shoulder. Root the femur bone down. Flex your toes, point your toes, whatever you feel like doing with your toes. Heavy head and shoulders. Let's take the strap into the left hand and cross the right leg over. Right hand into the hip crease. Just open that up. And bend your left knee. Put your right foot on your left knee for reverse pigeon pose on this side. So we're holding on to the back of the thigh or the front of the shin. Opening up those hips as best as you can. Allow your head and neck to relax. Stretch all your limbs out like a star. Exhale, knees into chest. Pick up your head. Put your right foot on the ground, head down on the ground, strap around your left foot. Decide whether you want your right leg to stay like this or your right leg straighten on the ground. Left foot lifting high. Root the left hip down. The shoulders are soft. And let's cross the left leg over to the right. Hold the strap in the right hand. Maybe the heel of your left hand compress the left hip crease. Finding a little space in that hip joint, a little release in the back. Back up to center, reverse pigeon on this side. Left foot on right knee, reach back to grab your shin or your thigh. Stretching your head. All right, let's release that happy baby pose. Grab your feet. Now let your counter nutation go ahead and happen. Let your pelvis round if it feels good. Just counter a lot of the work that we've done. You can rock a little bit if it feels nice. Breathing well. And then feet down onto the ground. Lift your hips, scoot them over to the right. Pick up your knees and drop them to the left. Coming into a twist, turn your head. Breathing fully. Coming back up. Scoot your hips over to the left, knees come up and go over to the right. A full breath here. And then come back up and find Shavasana. So if you want a moment of Supta Baddha Konasana, you can take a block underneath each outer hip for a moment. And just allow your pelvic floor, your belly, your inner thighs to softly open. Allow your head to get heavy. Your shoulders to relax. If you're in Supta Baddha Konasana, you can stay there as long as you want, and you can return your legs to neutral whenever you're ready. Nice even. And start to invite movement in your body, however it feels good to you.
Right. Finding your way onto your side. As soon as you're ready. Again, can you find that posture where your pelvic floor and your core are a little bit here for you? Let's offer the gift of our practice, our presence to another. Namaste. Thank you, everyone.